Welcome back. Thank y'all for joining us again as we continue to explore what it means to give children as many opportunities as possible past 12th grade and how our public K to 12th grade systems, pre-K to 12th grade systems can best prepare students for this idea of economic mobility, having more choice in life. And in our last episode, we explored how AI is really reshaping the way students access information and guidance, really changing the way schools think about college and career guidance, counseling, access, as more AI tools are on the market that schools can now buy and replace college counseling, career counseling. So it's ultimately changing how we decide we're preparing students for life after high school. And one key takeaway stood out from our last conversation. As technology is growing more sophisticated, it's just super tempting for us to see relationships as optional. Right? Like, I got this chat box. I don't actually need to have my college counselor. And so, Julie, you really pushed back on it as optional and really pushed us to think of it as essential. And although there's a ton of positives with having this immediate access for information for anyone, it's no longer gatekept. We also can't forget human connection and relationships when we think about a student's ability to be successful after 12th grade. And you ended us with a really powerful reminder that students just don't need an adult or an app. They need this web of people who are supporting their journey towards opportunity after high school. And with that, today we're going to zoom in on the people who do show up every day in students' lives, the educators, the families, the community of relationships that is already baked into their lives. And in schools where there's like tight budgets, college and career counselors are stretched thin, also acknowledging what does it look like to prioritize relationships as part of the work and not in addition to it, part of the work of moving students towards this idea of more choice after graduation. And in this conversation, Julie, you're really pushing us to challenge a common assumption that expanding opportunity post high school is not always about meeting new people, which is interesting. Thank you for coming back to talk to us about how small everyday actions help students kind of uncover and grow the networks they already have, especially in the age of AI and algorithms. This idea that we're continuing of how the most meaningful thing we might have to offer could possibly still be human connection. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me again. I'm excited to chat.
Yes, let's talk. I want to start by going deeper on an idea that you've said before. You said, what if expanding opportunity past high school is actually not about meeting new people? And I want to give you space because what do you mean it's not about? Like, is that what relationships are, meeting new people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, when I said that, Manon, and when I sort of remind people of that, it's because as a researcher who looks at the power of social capital, often I end up talking about networking. And like, what is the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about networking? It's meeting new people. It's also like feeling gross and like not really wanting to be there in my case, because I'm a self-proclaimed introvert, but like it has a little bit of gross connotations, but it certainly has this connotation of like going out, meeting new people, cold calling, like all that stuff. And what I have seen time and again in our work, particularly in the high school space, is that shortchanges the relationships that are already in young people's lives. It can be a very deficit-based way to look at this concept of social capital, because part of what we've seen happening is that, yes, we want young people to meet all sorts of new people and expand their possibilities, but that oftentimes it should start with them having new types of conversations with the people they already know. So back a couple of years ago, when we were doing research with a number of career-connected high school programs, we were working with researchers at AIR to do an evaluation. And one of the questions we asked young people was, who do you know, and who are you talking to about your future, right? Turns out young people know a lot more people than they are talking to about their future, right? They were not talking to folks in their after school programs and to their athletic coaches and to their neighbors at particularly high rates. They were talking to their parents. They were talking sometimes to their teachers. But what that showed us, it was really a map of like untapped potential in their existing networks. And the reason why an asset-based approach here is so important is twofold. First of all, it is very common, I think, when schools sort of try to teach networking or start to get into this idea of networking, to send a not even subtle message to students of you don't know the right people. And that is harmful. That reinforces stereotype threat. And moreover, it actually underestimates the value in their existing networks. The other reason I think it's really problematic is that people who already know and care about a young person are much more likely to help that young person, right? They are actually primed to help support a young person in advancing their next steps after high school, whether that's going to college, pursuing a career, or doing both. And so we're wasting that trust if we say go meet new people versus having conversations with the people you already know. Last thing I'll say is just like grounding us in a little bit of data here, which is the research shows that there's a distinction between what researchers call career chats and something called career conversations. So a career chat or a career talk is kind of what you might picture of like a guest speaker coming from like, you know, a CEO of a local company coming and like talking about their career and et cetera to a classroom of students. And that does show that it can have some effect. If young people deem that talk to be useful and they experience at least 3 to 5 of them over the course of a year, you can actually see longitudinal data that shows modest wage premiums from that kind of exposure.
You've given the comment that was really interesting to me that challenges the common assumption about expanding opportunities always about meeting new people. And you've actually said it's not about meeting new people. It's about having new types of conversations with the people you already know. Can I ask you to go a little deeper on that idea? Like, what does that mean? What does that look like in practice?
Yeah. So that comment is because I think we can often leap to wanting to connect young people to new individuals when really there's so many resources that exist within their communities that they may not be taking advantage of and that may not be being invited in to the conversation about their futures, right? Young people have coaches, they have neighbors, they have extended family, all of whom have some experience in the world and the labor market. And as young people are thinking about their future possible selves, the power of having conversations with those individuals who already know and care about them, it's not only proven in the research to be highly effective, but it is actually the best starting place for young people to be in the flow of building relationships that can support their future. And I think schools a lot of times just don't think of those existing connections when they think about expanding young people's networks. Oh,
So are you telling me that I should be having a career conversation with my coach if I don't want to be a coach? Like, I think that's
yes. No, it's not intuitive. So basically what all the research shows is that a career conversation where an adult that trusts a young person and vice versa sits down and hears about a young person's career interests, even if it's a totally different industry, right? They want to be an attorney and you're a basketball coach. The 3 things that an adult can do in that conversation that actually helps that young person align to and pursue that career more effectively is they can listen to what the young person is interested in. They can affirm that the young person is demonstrating career skills in that conversation itself, right? Like, you're describing this really well, or I've seen you on the team actually be really good at helping others accomplish their goals or whatever. They can acknowledge the young person's anxieties. In 2025, if you don't have anxiety about where the world is headed, I don't know who you are, right? And lastly, they can share their own career experience. And regardless of the industry they work in, that conversation will improve a young person's, what researchers call career alignment, their ability to pursue things that help them achieve their career goals. So the fact that any adult can do that, and that right now we host like networking events with random strangers, is such a disconnect for me in terms of a really easy step we could start to take towards ensuring that young people see the people around them as sources of wisdom and expertise and are starting to have more and more of those conversations.
Yeah. You said before that relationships matter for economic mobility, not just because of like what others can offer, but because of the confidence that comes with being seen. And there's an interesting connection here because I do think it's not bad, right? Like in elementary school, what do you have? You have career day. They talk about their career. You sit, you are a passive listener. I now have heard about a career that maybe is going to interest me. And I think we should continue doing that exposure. And then you get into high school and you have these career conversations where a pharmacist comes to talk to you because you are in the farm tech program, an engineer comes, and those things should happen. But connecting to what you said earlier about AI, I'm almost like, well, that's the information that AI can give me. But someone that I know personally, my next door neighbor, whoever, acknowledging my fears, talking about my desires, that offers a level of confidence that what I hear you saying, confidence, being seen, and just being able to be in that interaction with an adult I trust is going to be connected to my ability to be successful after 12th grade, which I don't think we've connected before. And it also, I'd love to hear more. It also kind of flips on its head some ideas we have around what communities have to offer.
Yeah. I'm going to say something really researchy and then I'm going to say it like a human. Like, confidence is the moderating variable in social capital development, meaning we can put people in front of young people they know or total strangers, and we can say, go network. Whether that young person feels confident approaching those adults is the make or break of whether that is a useful exercise for anyone involved. And the thing we have, I think, failed to do is create the opportunities for students to gradually build that confidence, right? And where should they start? They should start with people who already know and care about them and get practice talking to those people about topics that maybe they don't usually talk about, right? Like, I remember myself growing up. It's not like I thought of my neighbor as like a person with a career. They were just my neighbor. And so there's a little bit of support and skill building that comes into saying, like, maybe as a homework assignment, can you talk to your neighbor about their career experiences, right? And that tiny steps towards like young people seeking out help and feeling confident putting themselves out there has such a transformative effect in terms of what they will then feel equipped to do out in the quote unquote real world, which they're already a member of, but as they sort of go forth and maybe encounter new people, new industries, but have built that confidence inside of their community and their school. And so that piece, in America right now, we have what people call a loneliness epidemic. We have kids that are like on their phones 24/7, right? There's a lot going on that's sort of working against human connection. And part of what we have to do is help young people overcome an aversion to asking for help, to asking questions, to having these conversations. And so that's where I think their existing communities, their families, their extended families are the place to start.
Yeah. You said talking to the neighbor about the career. So am I hearing correctly? The conversations are still about careers. And I wonder
about your future. Let's get a little more expansive than that, right? Some of the career talk in education right now, I think, has skipped the step of like discovering your purpose and like what you're passionate about and then getting to careers. So like, yes, but generally like talking about your future is what we have sort of framed this as. It's like, what's your next step? What's the step after that? What are you dreaming of? And that's just, that might feel awkward for like your average adolescent to like start to have that conversation. But if we can normalize it, that's where the resources start to flow, right? That's where that neighbor might actually know someone you don't know, right? That neighbor could be an unlock to a whole new network. And yet that's not going to happen if we don't just start to talk.
Transparently, the pushback to what you're saying is it sounds like it comes from a place of privilege in terms of that neighbor could be unlocking another network because you're still the idea of power sharing in places where people feel powerless.
Yes.
And the answer to that could easily be, well, we still need the guidance counselor in the school because you're inherently describing an experience where the assumption is that my neighbor, one, has a career and two, has a network that they would connect me to. And I think I'm already going to cut this part, but
yeah,
I heard from you the first time that's feeling different. This time I'm going to cut this is the first time it was very much about like you being seen, them letting you talk about your desires and you feeling worthy, which gives you confidence to go out. And I think in this case, it's connecting back to a network.
A career opportunity. I know, but I can speak to that. I mean, this is like Ed DeJesus's work that I described of like, I think we underestimate the networks
when I hear you saying your neighbor can unlock a network, there's a lot of deficit-based thinking around underserved communities where that idea that if someone talks to their next door neighbor, they can unlock a network just doesn't exist, right? And that's why we put so much into networking and outside entities and sending you to programs, which I love. And I was a part of many programs. And so I think those are necessary. But help me understand the connection to also, in addition to that, or if you don't have access to that, all hope is not lost. If you can't do a program, if your guidance counselor can't talk to you, this idea of having new types of conversations with people you know. Walk me through what that looks like when the reality is the immediate answer for a lot of people would say, well, what if they're not in a community that has networks?
That has resources or networks. Yeah. And again, what I hear there is absolutely there are resource disparities between communities. And this is not a Pollyanna-ish, like, of course your neighbor should know a doctor, and that is totally unrealistic in some communities. What I have learned so much from my colleague Ed DeJesus, who runs a social enterprise called Social Capital Builders, is that even that mental model can sometimes lack imagination around the institutions and networks that individuals, even from low-income households, are members of. So one of Ed's examples that he often gives is a young person who's interested in computer science, and he's talking to him about, okay, how are you going to get an internship or a job shadow around this topic? And the kid says, well, I don't know anyone in this industry. And he says, where does your mom work? Well, my mom works at this company. And Ed's response is, does that company have an IT department? Right. And so his mom did not work in computer science. She did not work in a fancy job at this company, but she was connected to an institution that actually had people in it that were working in a domain that her son was interested in.
Yeah. So when I hear you say, talk to your neighbor because it could unlock new networks, I see the beauty in communities. I think that we underestimate the networks we have. I think we underestimate what they give us. I think about my neighbors growing up, and I think about what they gave me in terms of eye contact, talking to me, making me feel valued, just asking me questions, even if it was in a moment of teaching me how to change the oil of a car that has nothing to do with, I've never had a desire to be a mechanic, but it's in those moments. So I can definitely see what you mean. On the flip side, when people hear talk to your neighbor because you don't know what networks they can unlock, there can be an immediate reaction to say, well, in underserved communities, they don't have networks to unlock, or that is a privileged view to assume that the neighbors around you can unlock career connections or networks. And so what would you say to that? Because it's a bit of, we approach economic mobility when we talk about this, having conversations in your community from a deficit mindset. And so we often feel like we have to make up and for underserved communities, and there should be additional resources, but it's under the mentality that because there's nothing here that can help you with economic mobility. Therefore, I must teach you how to network out there. And I want to just explore that for a second with you.
Yeah. So I think this is such an important conversation because we should be fighting to address opportunity gaps at the same time as taking asset-based approach to the work with young people. And I think that it's like we're living in the in-between of these two. So the person who has taught me the most about this question you're posing of like, well, what if your neighbor doesn't have a network, is a guy named Ed DeJesus. He's based out here in Maryland and runs a social enterprise called Social Capital Builders. Incredible curriculum and training around this concept of building social capital. And Ed is one of the most asset-based practitioners that I have witnessed. And he's always reminding me of the importance of saying, if someone says, well, they don't have a network, it means that we haven't actually looked at that person's situation or circumstance with enough of an asset-based lens. So his example, right, is that a young person might want to work in computer science, and he'll say, okay, how are you going to find an opportunity in that space? And the kid will say, well, I don't know anyone. No one in my family works in computer science. No one in my neighborhood. And Ed will then dig deeper, and the curriculum will help young people dig deeper into like, well, wait a second. Didn't you say your mom works in this company, right? No, maybe not in a white collar job, maybe in a blue collar job, right? And yes, doesn't that company have an IT department? Okay, yes. Do you think your mom knows anyone in that IT department? Oh, maybe. I remember her mentioning this, right? Suddenly you've unlocked this invisible chain of connections that, yes, is 2 degrees of separation, but is a path to a conversation or a connection that young person could then turn into a conversation, an opportunity, and the like. And so I think when we discount the fact that members of lower income communities are completely detached from all institutions, we do ourselves a disservice from seeing those links. At the same time, right? I want a school that if a kid says I'm interested in computer science, has the infrastructure and the ability to connect that student to people working in computer science. So it's a both and. But if we don't do the first piece, we don't just leave value on the table. We send this message of, oh yeah, you don't have a network, right? Versus no, your network is just well hidden and it takes a couple steps to remember how connected you actually might be.
I love that, to remember how connected you actually might be.
Without gaslighting, right? Like this is the part of like, it's not just like, oh no, you have them. You just have to work a little harder for them. This is why I'm like, all of my work is around institutions need to be brokers of this, but an institution of being a broker with, and then ignoring where that kid's mom works and the fact that she actually does have a network is where this can slide into very deficit-based approaches that really do send a message to kids and their families.
And so as we're thinking about public education and the role it plays in students' ability to be economically mobile, meaning have more opportunities when they leave high school, make more money, know more people, have more choices in life, right? As we think about that, what I'm hearing you say is a couple of things. One, education institutions should be brokers for social capital, right? Right now, we've got some special heroes that do it, but like that should be the thing. And on the other end, part of being a broker is also acknowledging that that social capital lives within students' communities and helping them see where they can make connections. I think there's a piece here that's really empowering for me if I was a community member, family, parent, because it always feels like that lives outside of you. Career day, CT, it always lives outside of you as a family, as a community. And you just kind of are like hoping the school's carrying the weight of please do the thing. And what I'm hearing you say that I think is really beautiful is that there's another part of it that is around really just the power that communities and families hold to have conversations and in a very simple way, acknowledge fears, talk, eye contact, those interactions that you're having that build the confidence of the student and also help them learn more about you as an adult because there are connections you may not have known you had, the student doesn't know you have. And so I love this idea that economic mobility for students going through our public school systems, especially in under-resourced areas, are really this connected effort of one, recognizing the power and beauty of the community and being able to harness that through this idea of having conversations with people that you know, just having different kinds of conversations. And there's also the responsibility on the institutions of what are we doing to be brokers of social capital and having those like career conversations. So it's an interesting, I think we focus a lot on this one side and we've forgotten the idea of, and I'm going to say that quote again, it's not just meeting new people, but instead having new types of conversations with the people that you know. And so that's really interesting.
And just where I think schools are on this, I mean, schools are all over the map. So like if educators are listening, like your school may be doing great on this, you may not be doing anything related to this, but like what I see happening is schools that maybe are doing a little bit around like networking, right? So there's something happening there teaching it, but it's often not framed around this conversation idea. Just go have conversations with people that you already know about your future and like see what comes out of it. And that is networking, right? That isn't a different thing. And then I think schools are doing their best to like maybe bring in some outsiders, but they're really not full-fledged brokers of new networks aligned to students' interests. So like we're sort of low grade on both of these right now. But even if you are going to remain low grade because there's not a ton of resources going towards this idea of building social capital, it's not a line item in any school district's budget, do low grade, but be asset based about it. I think that's like sort of my push to schools of like, tell students they need to learn how to network, but like tell them to practice with the people they already know, right? Like encourage them to do that. And then if you're going to be a broker, like make sure that you're listening to what students' interests are and make sure that you're pulling families and community members into that brokering because they have resources to bring to bear as well.
You're right. You're right. I that is truly resonating with the idea of like family and community engagement lives over here. CTE, business partnerships live over here. And how can we bring that together? Because I think the combination of that really will just, when we talk about economic mobility, it's going to do wonders for students, or it has the potential. Kind of shifting us in another direction when we think about schools, there's this pressure often to make skill building efficient. And you named that curriculum where he was helping them navigate the relationships they have that are already within their circle, their community. And we kind of do that a lot. We want to make this relationship building skill, the skills you need to be successful after high school. We want to like make it something that we measure, assess, insert into a curriculum, which shows that there's a value. Like we see value in it. So I'm trying to figure out how to put it in this 30-minute advisory block. But you've argued that real relationship building takes time. So how do we shift our mindset and systems in public education to make space for what you're describing? Because that takes time to talk about your fears and your.
Oh, yeah. I actually want to hear your take on this as well, Maron, because I think this is like the bajillion-dollar question. And I, what I continuously come up against as I advocate for schools to pay more attention to this is exactly what you said. Like, here is the limited real estate we can give it in the schedule, right? 30 minutes here, 30 minutes there. Let's do a tiny module. Now, I want to say that there's like short curriculum that can still make a difference. There's a free curriculum called Connected Futures that educators should check out. It's evidence-based. It's all about helping young people become more confident in seeking help and tapping into their networks. So there's a place for this like short dosage stuff as the system still catches up to just how important this work is. But I think the other layer of this is a real mindset shift around the fact that schools are social capital rich environments and communities are social capital rich environments, but we just have not integrated that reality into teaching, learning, the schedule, and the school year in a particularly effective way. I think the reality, as we're talking about all of this, is that there's really limited time and money dedicated to this idea of building students' relationships, even though we know that building relationships also takes a lot of time. So I'm actually really curious, based on your experiences and what you see in the education system right now, like where does this fit? How do we get it more space and resources?
It's similar to you. I don't have a direct answer. I'm always exploring. I mean, there's the small actions, consistently showing up, asking questions, affirming students' potential that help students recognize, mobilize, and grow the relationships already around them in the way that you're describing. And so this idea of identity affirming and confidence to me lives. But when you think about a system, I thank you for throwing it back to me. With this and many things in public education, I'm always asking myself, what can we learn from history? Because often searching for this like silver bullet and this new thing. But let's look back at under-resourced communities. Let's look back at history and a time when we see economic mobility for certain groups happening. And I think that instead of always looking to find the new thing that's going to solve a problem, we should look back in history. And there was the time when there was space to just affirm students, to just have conversations. And in that space, we found that students could be seen, could be heard. And the more we talk about, and you could build relationships because the space existed. And so I know that's not really a direct answer, but I think I would start, not having an answer today, start by looking backwards and asking, what can we learn from history? And that's been kind of my constant thought when I think about how public school systems can better set students up for success after high school, is what can we learn from history as we're looking forward? And
so good
answer. It's, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if we look back enough.
I love that point. Yeah. And I think it resonates for me because like I'm an innovation scholar. And at the same time, I spend all day just being like, relationships matter. Like this should not be an innovation, right? Like to your point. But at this point in the system, it feels like it's such a sharp departure that it can sometimes feel like, oh, novel and radical and new to actually just make space for being human together. I will throw one thing out there that I think is a really good reflection device and is really quick, which is the Search Institute, which is a research institute that does amazing work around relationships, has this little one-page tool called a relationship check. And it's really just a reflection exercise for educators, parents, adults to kind of like reflect on how the relationships with young people in their life are going. And I think that kind of making that a routine practice just kind of gets it into the water. So this isn't like a program. Like we don't need relationship programming. We need it to flow through the school day and the school year and the communities young people live in so that they feel that support just as a natural part of their lives. So relationship check, we can put the link in the show notes, but I think it's a really great, easy practice.
It's so wild to me because there's so much research so that we can say this thing that humans have known for eons, which is relationship. And as we think about economic mobility, we're like, how do students after high school have more opportunity to move, have choices, have money? And I don't know, it's like just widening our lens around the kinds of adult student conversations that matter, because knowledge matters. Like you got to teach me my 1, 2, 3s and my ABCs. I can't be successful without that. I think that's so it's not an either or, but it's just, are we creating systems that allow for, yes, you to get your academics, but there's space to have the kind of adult student conversations that matter. And sometimes I feel like, our systems are so focused on one that we forget I cannot be successful in a job interview unless you like me, unless I can make eye contact. Because that resume, what I know is going to get me in the door. But once I sit in front of you, if I haven't had enough relationships and built enough confidence and enough exposure to sit in front of you and it's basically make you like me, make you feel like I am going to be good at this. I can make eye contact. I can talk to you. And you can ask me questions about myself and I can answer them. That to me is the core of why relationships matter. And when I think about public schools, why we need the space for the kinds of adult student conversations, like you said, around what I'm thinking, what I like. And if, and you said the research in Texas, if only 6% of the face time of a college counselor, career counselor's time is spent talking to students about that, I think we say, okay, so where else do we teach students to empower themselves to have and that's what I'm hearing from you. It's not, we need to come down on the counselors and say it should be 30%. It's cool, great. Yes. And how are we empowering students to recognize the adults that are in their life or the other students, the people in their lives that they can be having conversations with that allow them to get those skills when they show up at that interview or when they're making, just navigating things. So
yeah, those skills, and I'll just say it, and those networks, right? An estimated half of jobs come through personal connections. So if we are not thinking about our high school graduates as graduating with skills, knowledge, and networks, we are never going to level the playing field. We are never going to have the impact on economic mobility that is in the rhetoric right now, but not in the design of school. So I just want to underscore that, like, I want those kids going into those interviews also with connections, not in a gross nepotistic way, but like that they have met people that work at the place they are applying, because we have designed a system where those relationships and conversations are within reach.
Say that one more time, because I think you kind of went past it. Did you say that half?
Yeah, like an estimated half of jobs come through personal connections. So this is like the part of the opportunity equation that I think schools have not fully embraced. And it's why I do the work I do. But it's getting to the point, Madan, you were making of like, this is not instead of skills and knowledge, right? It's an addition to, but it's a really important addition if we care about young people having options in the labor market.
Yeah. Yeah. What if relationships were the goal and not just the means? Because there's true. I know we are almost at our time. I want to thank you so much for helping us reframe what it means to prepare students for life after high school. If I'm taking anything from the culmination of the conversation, it's that relationships aren't just a tool to like unlock opportunity. They're like part of the opportunity itself, and helping students understand how they can use the networks around them, whether it's school, whether it is career, community, helping students just understand that they have a network all around them regardless, and how to access it is going to be really important in whether or not students are able to be successful after high school. And this grounded reminder that you've given us of students just don't need information, they need confidence and they need networks. That fact of almost half of jobs are got through knowing someone. I think that is most of our lived experience. Like, we know that. Somehow we hear it and we're like, whoa. But they don't just need information. They need confidence. They need those social skills, and they need a network. And so I just want to thank you. This idea of us all being a part of what it means for a student to be economically mobile. And we are part of this web of people situated differently in lives. And public schools are a big part of that, and helping students see the networks they have outside of it. Yeah, so schools being a place to help students situate themselves differently in life, see the people around them situated differently in their life, and seeing who can walk alongside them as they think about their path after high school. Schools play a really important role in that, which brings us to where we're headed next. In our upcoming episode, we'll talk to Michelle Hamilton, who's the founder of Pear Tree Montessori, a school in Oakland, California, designed to build belonging and economic diversity into its foundation. And so she really pushes us to think, if we know relationships matter, what happens when a school is built from the ground up with connection and belonging at its core? In the way we were just saying, public schools can often, relationships are secondary to student achievement outcomes. We'll be talking to Michelle Hamilton, who built a school that was designed for relationships, with the idea that identity relationships will move economic achievement and therefore give students more opportunities, post-secondary success, and economic mobility, and how school environments that center both identity and academic challenge lay the groundwork for lasting opportunity. So we hope that you will join us as we move into kind of a case study of a school that's doing what we're describing and learn a little bit from them. Until then, thanks for listening as we think about public schools in relationship to economic mobility.